very much, ladies and gentlemen. I am actually the baby of the room. Only 6 months ago did I start talking about this, running the channel, and I've had incredible luck talking to many of the people in this room and many more who are doing the amazing work. So I take no credit for any of that. My job today is to try and keep everybody on time so that we can all go. This is one of many extremely important gatherings of like-minded souls. Up until about 4 or 5 days ago, I didn't know I was going to be emceeing this. I was an attendee just like yourselves. Somebody dropped out and they said, "Oh, we know someone who's vivacious, mad and silly enough to stand in front of people, far more intelligent than himself." So any claps for me goes actually back to you, because you are our hope, and the people that you work with are our hope. And it's all down to all of us now to make a big change. And I've been speaking to quite a few of you over the years, and I've realised quite rapidly the perilous situation that we're in. And whilst I often make fun of it on the YouTube channel, I think comedy is a good way of battling this, it doesn't take away the fact of just how bloody serious this is. And so meetings like this and many others have just got to keep going as we keep sharing the information and encouraging more and more to rise up and resist. So I'd like to start with an apology from Andrew Bridgen, who was going to come. Unfortunately, he is very ill at the moment, which is very sad. He's doing a hell of a lot of work, as we all know. And he sent these words, so I should just read them as best I can, but please imagine that it's Andrew Bridgen here. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry for not being able to attend in person today, but I send you all my best wishes. We are indeed living through biblical times, and I fear that things will have to get considerably worse before they can get better. We have so-called democracies across the globe legislating lockstep to impoverish their own people, while at the same time seeking to reduce their freedoms. The main weapons used against us are fear, censorship and cancelling. As Harry S. Truman said in 1950, once a government is committed to the principle of silencing the voice of opposition, it has only one way to go, and that is down the path of increasing repressive measures, until it becomes a source of terror to all its own citizens and creates a country where everyone lives in fear. The dark forces behind the current direction of travel are now fully committed to their plan. If it was a game of poker, they would be all in. And so is all of humanity now. The next 12 months will be crucial. Fortunately, we now have growing awareness within the wider public that the people are scared. They are looking for leadership. We now have allies around the world that we're working with to face the same enemy. The old politics of right and left are over. It's now the politics of right and wrong, good versus evil. And good always wins in the end, because the human spirit is now rising in resistance, and when it's roused, it is indefatigable. Keep the faith and keep up the fight. That from Andrew Bridgen.
Hello everyone. Hello Adrian, hello Justin, thanks for making time for me. I wish I could be there with you, but my schedule just doesn't make it possible. I'm sure, as is the case for many, there are so many things going on, so many jobs upon our time that it's impossible to be everywhere at once. And while I would very much like to be among you taking part in this conversation, I can't be. So I send these words just in the hope that the day ahead proceeds well, and that you're able to leave at the end of this conference informed, energised and perhaps reassured. It can seem overwhelming, the task that's ahead of us. It can feel as though the forces ranged against us, the opponents in the game, have been laying foundations and building the lower courses of a prison for a long time. And many of us, myself included, feel we've come late to the game and that perhaps we're doing too little and it's too late. But I would say on the contrary, that's completely unnecessary to feel that way. I often use the analogy that what's been attempted is an inversion of the natural order. I've often used the analogy that you can hold a ball underwater if you wish to, and if you're prepared to use up the necessary energy so to do. But the moment your strength fails, the ball returns to where it wants to be, to where the universe demands that it be on the surface. And I think eventually the forces ranged against us will simply run out of energy, and the universe and the natural order will reassert itself. I think that's the attitude of mind that I try to maintain. It can be very easy to be discouraged by the enormity of the task. It feels as though our opponents in this game have had a very long time to prepare, and that the foundations and the lower courses of masonry of what they are seeking to erect were laid long ago. It can feel as if many of us are coming late to the game. I'll confess that I was inexcusably oblivious to what has obviously been going on for almost all of my life. It's only in the last 2 or 3 years that I myself have started properly to pay attention to what's going on, and it can be discouraging when you think maybe it's that we're doing too little and too late. But on the contrary, I think the strategy is to remember and to determine to take care of those things that matter most. When I say that what's being raged against us is anti-human, I absolutely mean it. They are contemplating a future in which people don't behave as humans always have and as humans need to do.
Neil, you've been away now for a few years, and obviously you are a student of history. You see how history pans out. And, well, we've always had humanity on the back foot at times when people who have agendas suddenly feel they have a divine right to take the centre stage and to impose themselves upon humanity. But when you look at the size of the numbers of people we're involved in, and one well-known a chap called Ronald Bernard, a Dutch banker, said that 8,000 people basically control the world, and there's 8 billion of us, so approximately that's 1 million human beings for every one of these wretched globalists. So, in your own feel of things, do you feel now that people are waking up and that they are going to want a strategy to guide them to ultimate victory?
I think people are waking up, yes, and in considerable numbers. It's always difficult, well nigh impossible to put figures on these things, but my sense is that more and more people are paying attention to important matters all of the time. The challenge remains, however, that we live in an increasingly atomised society. It was Hannah Arendt, the journalist who paid close attention to the Eichmann trial in the early 1960s, who I think coined the term atomisation of society. Because of the prevalence of digital alternatives to being face-to-face, we increasingly conduct our lives remote from one another. We three are doing that just now, rather than being in one room, myself, Adrian and you, Justin, we're all in different places. And that's an undermining of the natural instincts that make us strong as individuals, as families and as communities. It's when, as you do now at this conference, have the opportunity to share space with one another, to share the same air, which is literally to conspire, to read each other's body language, to have the full comprehensive experience of what it is to be together. It's that which we have been denied, and particularly during lockdown, it was that which I would suggest we were deliberately denied. The lockdown and the rest of it was a concerted effort to keep people apart as much as possible, even within families. even extended families were denied one another's company. And in those circumstances, atomised people are very vulnerable to a narrative that's pushed at them by the state and by a compliant mainstream media. People on their own or in small groups who are consuming the message are gathered together into a mass. You know, what the clinical psychologist Matthias Desmet has described as mass formation. And when the individuals within that mass have free-floating anxiety, free-floating anger, when they feel lonely, atomised and separated one from another, they become vulnerable to an idea. And that in large part is what has happened. And so what people need, and what it might be possible to give people, is another idea, is to give people an alternative to what has been the glue of that mass formation. And I think what you are able to do by coming together for this conference and then going back out into your constituencies, so to speak, it is possible and timely, and it will be effective to spread a counter-narrative. And I think the counter-narrative is out there. I think it's interesting to note that our opponents expected that the internet would give them all of the power that they needed. I think it's the coming of this technology upon which we all depend so deeply. I think our opponents thought that that would give them the knockout punch, and that they would be able to tell us whatever they wanted to tell us. But given the law of unintended consequences, I think it is also undeniably true that it's the internet that has provided all of us with the opportunity to come together in different ways and to share information and facts and truths that our opponents would rather we didn't have, and information they would rather we didn't share. And also because people are determined to come back together in the real world, in real spaces, get together like this conference and share ideas in real time. I think that is our strength, and that will lead to the undoing of the forces that are ranged against us. I am as pessimistic as the next person. You know, I often tend towards the dark side and to feel hopeless. And so anybody else who feels like that, you know, as it were, metaphorically, come and sit down with me, because I know exactly how you feel. But I have my wife, truly, always close at hand, and she is a much more positive person. She is the yin to my yang, the sweet to my sour, you might say. And I think it's incumbent upon us, and it's beholden upon us to take advantage of one another's strengths. You know, we complement one another. And by coming together as an otherwise disparate group of people and sharing ideas and admitting to ourselves and to one another that we feel overwhelmed, and to admit to one another that we have times when we feel hopeless, is very important, because I think what has largely been missing from the narrative, the official narrative, is the truth. Honesty, frank honesty. And I think it will ultimately be the path to victory, back to the sunlit uplands, when we come together and are honest with one another in ways that the state and our opponents have not been honest with us. You know, it's a well-known phrase that the truth will set you free, and I think it is the case. And you know, and other people have quoted the line about, you know, the truth is like a lion in a cage. You know, if you just let it out of the cage, it will take care of itself. So this that you have before you now, this conference, is an opportunity, more than anything else, to be honest with one another, to speak frankly and from the heart. And I think it's by sharing that truth without overthinking it, just giving voice to our inner thoughts as they occur to us, that will inevitably lead us to where we need to be, you know, which is a better place and entirely different from that anti-human, anti-nature, anti-society version of events that's being proposed for us.
Can I ask you, what is your personal vision for humanity? What is it that you would like to see handed over to your children and perhaps your grandchildren? What sort of world would you like to see, bearing in mind what we've experienced over the last few decades?
Sometimes people say to me, do you wish do you wish you hadn't woken up? Do you wish you were still in that state of blissful ignorance, just happily going about your business unawares? And for a moment or two, I suppose it might sound tempting, but my unequivocal answer is no. That I am aware that for the first 50 odd years of my life, I was living in a cloud of half-truths and untruths that were foisted upon me by a carefully choreographed and calculating machine of the state. I was being fed and I was happily consuming a version of events that was half-truths and downright lies. And what I want for my children is a completely refreshed and renewed world. I don't want to go back. I don't think in many respects that there's anything worth going back to. I think we need a turning away from the powers that be. I think we need a turning away from what it is that they have in mind. There's a 1980s film, War Games, in which a supercomputer of the time has taken control of the launch codes for the nuclear arsenal in the United States, and it's on the point of releasing all the missiles against the Soviet Union and thereby starting World War III. And almost everyone has run out of ideas, but a young gamer teaches the supercomputer at the last moment noughts and crosses, and plays the supercomputer at noughts and crosses, and almost instantaneously the computer learns futility, that an unwinnable game is not worth playing by equally matched competitors. And it draws the conclusion that sometimes the only winning move is not to play. I think we are being gulled and lulled and tricked into taking part in a game that's rigged against us, that has been well prepared in advance, but there is no point in trying to play it. And we should draw a line and say, this far and no further. Because if people keep walking down the road that's laid for them and enter the game of digital IDs and 15-minute ghettos and central bank digital currencies and all of the rest of it, that whole panoply of tricks, if you knowingly step into that arena thinking that you can play them at their own game, I would say you can't. And I think the only winning move is not to play. And it requires, therefore, a turning away. We have to turn our backs on every aspect of what is proposed, up to and including refusing to submit to digital IDs, up to and including refusing to use central bank digital currencies. Now, I don't have the strategy necessarily or the solutions to the problems that all of that proposes, but I think it's the right attitude of mind. And I think it's incumbent upon groups like this, groups like yourselves gathered here today, to come up with the ways in which we might perform civil disobedience, that we might perform a turning away, and that we might find alternative ways to organise ourselves. That we can organise at the community level. We can think about other ways to educate children. We can remind ourselves that there are other ways to produce food. There are other ways to take care of our health and well-being. There are other ways to organise ourselves without submitting to some kind of police force and to 24-hour-a-day surveillance made possible by image recognition cameras. There are other ways to be. I think there absolutely is a better future, and I think it's more within our grasp than many people think, but I think it does come down to being prepared to turn away from what is proposed, finding those of like mind and building alternatives from the grassroots up. It's been done before, and it's necessary, and it is necessary. It will be done again.
About mass forming and abusing the kids mentally, mainly, but also psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually. We started off a little bit, maybe it was the heat, but we were slightly out of focus, and we started off talking about standard school, so I'm going to reverse a little bit how we started. Talk about the mainstream problem, which is classes are too big. There's a sensory nightmare for most kids. Teachers are changed, so it's very impersonal education. There's an attention deficit, which the system says is your problem, but in fact is the system's problem because it can't give you the attention that you need. Learning speeds are different. There's too much bureaucracy. It's not enough, not child-centred enough. I think we know all these things. Then higher education, they're actually defunding courses that involve critical thinking, like philosophy and art and poetry and whatever. And it's all focused on how successful you can be in your career as quickly as possible. The alternatives that were talked about initially are the Steiner model, which is more child-friendly, classes are smaller, it's more intuitive, you get to know your teacher, so it's a more humanising as opposed to dehumanising experience. And we also talked about the limits of Steiner education, because there aren't many of them and you've got to be near one, and if it's privately funded you've got to be able to afford it, and if it's not independently funded then the schooling system could in effect capture it using blackmail and financial, all kinds of skullduggery. So we have to be careful, especially with the schools bill maybe making a comeback soon. We have to be, anything earmarked as school or education has got to be very careful. And that segues nicely onto the Hope Sussex model, which as a result of being pestered by people like myself, they've taken the word school and the word education out of their vernacular. So it's just a Hope Sussex community hub. And within that hub, lurking in plain sight, or hidden in plain sight, are classrooms that nobody needs to see. But there's also a cafe, so eventually the elders will come back in, being served in the cafe by the kids. So this is how, one way that you get kids away from screens, away from indoctrination, and re-engaging with the demographic which is dying earlier than it should, which is because a lot of people over the age of 80 literally dying of broken hearts because they've been isolated, rejected, abandoned. So what else? Home education is frightening for a lot of people, mainly because they went to school and they can't cope with many things, can they? They haven't got the resilience. It's frightening. But if enough people take the plunge, the 100 monkey syndrome will kick in, and we are in it for the long game. We've got to get people to see the attraction of home education and inspire others to follow suit. And in my book, shameless plug here, chapter 12 in home education, there's plenty of parents who say they couldn't imagine ever home educating, and now having done it, they can't imagine ever not home educating. Quite an incredible journey that they go on. There's also Universal Kids in Stockport with Leyden, someone that I know personally, who's pioneering home education style organised groups in Stockport, the hub of progressive thinking. That's because it's near Manchester, which is where I come from. Thank you very much. Finance is key. So a lot of the system has made both parents feel the need to work, so that's part of the problem. So, you can't divorce education from finance. Very, very, very difficult. There's forest schools. Some of them are not authentic in the sense that they just teach kids outside and they call themselves a forest school, whereas in the authentic version, you're actually rewilding the child. Mainstream kills individuality, and love of learning, traumatizes, kills creativity. There's actual scientific evidence for most of that. A healer amongst us says that she's now getting children who are shutting down and in crisis, and my research has suggested that that's true. They're totally in crisis. So she simply reminds them that it's not that the problem is that they don't fit in. It's that the problem is the system wants them to fit in, but they're not meant to fit in. So they end up being taken out of the system in some way and get their healing. Because these new humans, we didn't discuss this concept, new humans. These new kids, new humans, must not be mainstream school. They must not be, to preserve their sanity.
to, you know, the future generations of parents to not take their kids to...
Okay, I'm going to come to that, Richard. Good question. We're about to address that issue. The social media is also a huge problem, and partially addressing this issue, we've got kids now who are literally, they've been gobbled up by AI. They've been captured, they've been taken off planet almost. You know, they're a world of their own. So they've lost all kinds of skills. The TikTok and Instagram are reacting to their reactions. So they're being literally led away from consensus reality into a world in which everything happens instantly. So they won't come to a talk, they won't read a book, they don't have patience, they don't have tolerance, partly the problem is their own parents are not available enough to kind of pull them back in. So, how do we rescue the kids? I'm addressing how do we rescue the kids from AI? Well, what we concluded is that there's a certain amount of destiny at play here. Those who are destined to follow their heart and their soul will find their solution, will find their tribe and their solution in community. That's the bottom line. They will find this is already forming. Those who are not destined, for whatever reason, we can debate till the cows come home what those reasons are, will end up gobbled up by AI because the beast eats its own children. So we have to be very philosophical. We cannot rescue, and it's not even our job anyway, the entire planet. And we don't have to rescue the entire planet. We just have to make sure that those who want to be rescued are rescued. That's all.
I'm going to have to hurry you.
Yeah, okay. Coming to the end. At the end of the day, it's all about free will choice. So it's all about giving people a platform in which to exercise their free will choice. The bifurcation, which I've hinted at before, didn't give it a name, is inevitable, and we have to take that on board. And the bottom line now, community, which I'm repeating myself now. It's community, community, community. And as long as we bring the elders back in and help the kids to reconnect with the elders in new communities, we've cracked it. Thank you very much.
Bad science, 5G and transhumanism. Firstly, we decided that we'd just focus on 5G because transhumanism doesn't work without 5G, so that was our main focus. So the first thing and most important thing had to be awareness and educating people. And if the council are unwilling to do that, then there has to be some form of people's council, as the guys from Thetford were alluded to before, a way of, and that could be in the form of targeting local groups such as Stand in the Parks or letters to residents on the health implications, especially people with pacemakers, metal implants of any kind, so perhaps getting them on another angle. Also educating parents as to the dangers to children, they're they succumb more easily to the effects of 5G. And then also educating local councillors. Nicholas was telling us all about his work that he's doing in councils, and he said that actually a lot of councillors are interested, and when they actually understand what's going on behind the push forward with 5G, they are interested and they are worried about it. So drawing their attention to the Health and Social Care Act, which is their responsibility to protect local residents. We also talked about withholding council tax on the basis that the council is unwilling to engage with the public on the dangers of 5G, and that could be a reason for withholding it. Also playing the aesthetic angle, so not just pushing what some people might deem conspiracy theorists, playing to people's what they deem to be important, which sometimes often is just the aesthetics. They don't like the way it looks around the town. Then we looked at the eco angle, so the amount of energy consumption that 5G masts consume, 3 times more than a 4G tower, and it basically breaks their net zero policies, so kind of using their own agenda against them, and to make them understand. Also, which was interesting, the ICNIRP, which is the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, the heating metric which they measure it by is the specific absorption rate, which is the SARS. So they were telling us it was open for us all there to see SARS-CoV-2. So that's what we looked at there.
Sorry, can I just jump in? If
Yeah.
you don't mind? So
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with this
Okay.
5G epidemic punching, and I've got my new judicial review actually against Cheltenham Borough Council. It's based on ICNIRP. I'm going to show that every single ICNIRP certificate is actually invalid.
Wow.
Right, because ICNIRP excludes people with metal implants.
Okay.
I imagine most people in this room have metal in their body in some shape or form. Earrings, piercings, I don't know, but
Chemicals in the air.
yeah, so basically, showing them that and saying, your ICNIRP is invalid. Show me the health protection that you're giving to these people. And if they can't do it, then they're breaking this statutory law.
Yes.
The Health and Social Care Act, which you mentioned.
Yeah, totally. We need to
Fantastic. And then we just basically spoke about mitigation, which is, hardwiring all your technologies at home, not using your mobile phone to your head, and switching it off when you possibly can, remove the smart meters, joining local groups, opposing masks when they're proposed. Also the importance of grounding yourself, getting out, touching the air, getting away from the influence of 5G and the use of alternative technologies by our residents. Such like.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Right, how are we going to do this? I'm going to put it down. I'm going to put it down on the floor. I think I might just sit there. So I can't even read the buttons. So anyway. Okay, hello. Anyway, hello. Let's go around here. That's it. Perfect. Right. Money, economics. Well, you can imagine what our table was like when you get a group of people around the table who all think they know a bit about money, money creation, and everything else. You can imagine we didn't have a huge amount of agreement to start with, but then it came together. Right. First and foremost, we all agree that money creation, money control should be in the hands of the people, not the corporate banksters. So we know the system is rigged against us, so we have to withdraw from the system. Right, we challenge the lack of accountability. We obviously support totally Chris's view that you refuse to pay tax, which is funding terrorism, and I think this is extremely important what Chris is doing, and I think something we've got to take up and promote. We've also mentioned learn from history, and we have an example of colonial script in America which was extremely successful for the colonists for about 20 to 30 years, and that was the real reason for the American War of Independence. So that's something to look at, and other perhaps parts of history which where for instance, we didn't mention this, but Liverpool created its own money once upon a time in the 1790s. They had to get permission from central government, that's the only downside, but it can be done. Right, the Bank for North Dakota, that was mentioned, that is running very well. It's a state-run bank for the people who live in North Dakota. It works, it's a fantastic business model and completely divorced from the Federal Reserve and every aspect of the federal government. We moved on to all bank evictions must be considered to be unlawful. And as we get the Great Rising organised, one of the things we're going to have is an emergency notice board. So if somebody is being evicted from their home by an unlawful means, we will put a panic button out, because hopefully this will become a vast network to get people physically there to stop the bailiffs from doing their work. Peacefully, of course. Right, moving on. We want to encourage people to stop giving their data away. I'm not an expert in this department, but I think it's straight to say that the new money for tomorrow, and I know Sandy is always saying this, is data harvesting, data collection, and we've got to curtail that and not make life simple for them. We want to see wealth preservation, because obviously the banks, what people don't realise is that when you put your money into a bank, it's not your money anymore. And of course they're now itching to do their bank bail-ins. Instead of the bank bailouts where the government bails them out, they're going to bail in and take your own money out, which they did in Cyprus. So that's something which clearly is on the cards, and we've got to make people aware. Education. The thing that I've noticed, and I think we all agree, I'm ignorant when it comes to trying to work out what the system is. As I admit to people, when the BBC economics chap comes on with all his graphs and all his formulae, I just glaze over and don't listen, because I don't understand it, and that's how they want it. They don't want people to understand it. I've asked 25 MPs, what can you tell me about the Bank for International Settlements? None of them could tell me what the hell that bank does. So there's huge levels of ignorance. Now, the problem we've got is that we have got to provide people with immediate solutions for when the big collapse comes. Because the big collapse will come to justify CBDCs and to go as China has gone. But we need to get that information out now, not when it happens. So we've got to prepare people for it. Now, the Universal Community Trust and sovereign communities is something that needs to be investigated thoroughly. I'm glad to say that people here today are knowledgeable of that, and they get something else that needs to be put out. Isn't that right, David? Yep. I like you. Yeah, good. Well, I didn't think you were paying attention.
I'm making notes.
No, the most important thing on here is that we've set up a working group. Jason Noble, Chris Coverdale, Jano Bradley and David Leahy, and anyone else here who would like to get involved in that. This is preparing communities for when this inevitable happens, who would like to get involved. If you do, just come and see me and we'll get you on the list. But we're going to set up a working group to follow this one through, because I have to say, listening to the people on my table, there was a lot of talent. Not me, but the people around me, there was a lot of talent. And we need to now get that talent moving in the right direction to help us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. To the stage. Thank you very much.
Okay, you will notice I come freehand. So the reason I come freehand is it's a case of where are we going to start what is probably the most complex subject on the planet. Now, everything else on here is complicated. It comes from and by man. But the subject we had is nature. And she is highly complex and probably more complex than all of us together can conceive. So we have a very challenging conundrum here. We have a food system that is chaining the farmers. They're chaining their minds, their hearts, their hands. We have food that is quite clearly killing the ecosystem as much as it's doing that to the majority of people. But what is the actual problem? And we came down to two main issues. The one is finance. How do we change the system when the token of exchange at any moment could change? And of course, we went through some of the main things, but at the end of the day, if we're looking to feed the people, how do we do this? So that's an unended question, because whilst we can use other things, we don't know as and when something could change. The big challenge is land. Not so much getting it, but populating it with people that understand the soil, the need for nurturing, the need for regeneration, the need for tomorrow. So the bottom line is, how do we find a new generation, that new generation that is sat looking at a two-dimensional screen, who have been trained to think that germs are bad and soil is, dirt. How do we change their mindset? How do we find those new people? And I do believe that it's going to be a whole new generation. Are we going to change the children of today that have not been exposed? And one of the things that I shared with the group is a gentleman that came to work for us for a summer. He had a very, very famous grandfather by the name of Sir Laurence Olivier. He was a great orator, and he spent a summer moving cows for us on little squares every day, which over time was regenerating our land. And just to give you some data in that, in 3 years, just through moving cows, we quadrupled our productivity. I could have doubled that further if I could have had the hours in a day or found someone that would have liked a business with no rent, growing chickens or even eggs. But guess what? I can't find that person. And this is the same problem. I'm going to say awake farmer, a farmer that cares, that's the same problem they've got, is finding the people that want to do it. The other side of that equation is how do they earn a living out of it when they have rents at astronomical rates. So this is complex, but we came up with a solution which is natural service. That perhaps when the revolution comes, the children of tomorrow will actually get to spend a year in the real world, in the real environment, growing food, touching nature, understanding it. Perhaps we should all do some citizen science and see what devastation we've actually wrought to the world. We're so lucky in this part of the world. We can do a lot of damage without actually seeing it. If we did the same management in Africa, we would be starving. So I'm just saying there is a whole revolution that is needed in agriculture, and again, it starts with us, because we need to find the people to go back on the land. The land is there, we can get it, and where is Sam? Sam, goody. Sam has a great project, and I think you inspired me, because they are gorilla growing on a piece of land in Burntwood.
By Edgefield.
Yeah.
It's on an industrial estate. It's in the middle of an industrial estate. It's the most unlikely piece of land you're ever going to find. And we've transformed it in less than 18 months into a very productive piece of land. We've got chickens on there. We're using chicken manure to regenerate the land. We were lucky enough to get a load of manure from somebody that really wanted it down at Eastbury straight away last year. We had an abundant harvest last year. We fed a lot of the people in the group. And this year will be double the amount. If we can do it in Burntwood on industrial land, but we had to literally bring in the soil. We did do that. If we can do that there, you can do that anywhere.
But what it takes is something that not many people do, and that's doing it, not talking about it. Go out there and do it, because unless you are the light, no one will follow you.
Just before I start, I'd just like to say that all this information on all these sheets that you've all contributed to will be put in the minutes of this meeting and all listed and all sent out to you by an email in about a week's time. So all this information you will get sent to you. Yes. Oh, that's what I can see now. Yeah.
Come this way.
Before I talk about I'll come to that in a moment. Before we start, I want to ask you an important rhetorical question. I'd just like to take a few seconds to give yourself an honest answer. And this is the question. What is the most precious thing in your life? Now, today. What is the most precious thing?
Louise, your health.
Yeah, you might say your partner, you might say your children. Absolutely, all important. If someone asked me what the most precious thing in life is, my answer would be health. mental, physical and spiritual health. Because if we don't have health, we can't enjoy the wonderful fruits of life. Health is so, so important. And when I look at all the lists of everything we're doing here today, I'll tell you, hand on heart, the one that scares me, the one that really scares me more than any, is the pandemic treaty. Everything else is a threat to us, but if this pandemic treaty is signed and goes ahead, that's game over. That means we no longer have control over our own bodies and our own future and our own health. It means it's controlled by a third party who don't have good intentions for our life. So that's why I wanted to take part in this particular group. And I think stopping the pandemic treaty, for me personally, is the most important thing that I can contribute to. Not that everything else isn't important, but for the sake of my children and my grandchildren, I do not want this thing signed. And we can all...
Sorry, Joe, just mention,
yeah.
It doesn't require signing, it's the amendments to the International Health Regulations. It's two documents.
Two documents, yeah, I was just going to say...
The amendments to the International Health Regulations is the one that doesn't require parliamentary ratification.
Yeah, that's okay, thanks Tess. No, you're absolutely right. It was great having Tess in the group because she finger is right on the pulse. Sign the petition, there's a number of the petition, calling for a vote to reject the amendments in the IHR document. And I think you've got lots of these documents here today, and they're heavy reading, they're not easy, but you really, really should take one away. So we must all do what we can, we must sign this petition, and we must follow up with our local MPs, who I think have been given lots of information already by the World Council for Health, but some of them, I don't know if they've read it, have they, Tess, at the moment, or understood it?
They've all received hard copies and they've been put on notice to consult their constituents.
They've been put on notice and they've all received copies, yeah. So other things that we can do, leaflets to everyone in our networks, and the World Council for Health website has lots and lots of information. Taking positive en masse action, and there's a few ideas there. Downloading docs from WCH, including the WHO docs, and working your way through them. And mainly awaken people to the implications of the WHO controlling our health.
How do you awaken people to that?
I think basically just speaking to as many contacts as you have who don't understand what the implications are, and just asking them to do a bit of research.
Well, you said leaflet because it's got cartoons on it, you know.
Yeah.
Who decides is
Yeah. That's right, so it's just saying about the leaflet, the one-page leaflet back inside, that is key to helping people to understand, and giving them that leaflet is crucial. So, yeah, tackling your GPs on the... Just talk to your local GP about the absolutely irrefutable evidence on vaccine damage. Evidence they can't deny. On the broader scale of health, moving on from WHO, is the threat of 5G, which I'm not going to go into because that needs absolute exposure, and that was great news I just heard from over there. Give your support to the World Council for Health and all the great work Tess is doing. The other things is the importance of clean water, the importance of good health being dependent on nutritional food, and try and educate our youth, who are largely ignorant of these things, through the mediums that they understand, like art and music, and taking the opportunity to teach our young about human rights and sovereignty, going back to the first presentation on why we need to change the way we do education. And lastly, sorry, was there one on that page? I turned 2 pages, so there was one more, I think. Yeah. This is one of the things that I do. I'm a freelance writer. I submit articles to many different magazines, local and national, and if you're a writer, you can awaken people through your articles. So make use of as many documents as you can which expose what's really, really happening, and also look at the great freeset.org organisation, because we must take back control of our own health.
Go down the tube tonight. Was there anybody else who was a facilitator or responsible person? Adrian Price, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. You're right there.
Okay, so our group over there, where we were talking about fake greens, which was a catchy name. What by that we mean the fake green narrative and the people who support it because they don't know any better. So one of the, we were trying to stay solutions focused. Not easy, because we kept sort of going back to what the problems are, but as I said earlier, you need to talk about the problems in order to figure out how to solve them. So we talked about doing freedom of information requests on, for example, the local council's engagement with brain's fading. You know, things like the SDGs and the UN climate change agenda and what have you. So FOIs on what exactly councils have been doing. We also talked about producing, using some online surveys to kind of weaponize these surveys so that you can both gather data from the general public to get an idea of where people stand in terms of their beliefs on these issues and their level of knowledge and understanding, and also potentially as a recruiting mechanism. We'd have to look into the data protection implications of using the information in that way, but it's certainly something that's worth considering. We talked about other forms of community engagement, such as leafleting, to draw out information about the trajectory regarding things like LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, etc., and all the other initiatives that will affect our lives. Of course, one of the difficulties is overcoming the programming, the mind programming. We thought that there was political capital to be made out of identifying the lack of any kind of due diligence in the procedures that council follow when they adopt measures like LTNs and zero carbon, net zero policies. Do they really look into what the effects are going to be on their local economy and the way the local community dynamics works? We also thought that there was some potential for measuring the actual pollution levels because there's some empirical evidence that in actual fact particulate levels are nowhere near as high, even in places like London, as Sadiq Khan would have you believe. In fact, they tend to be way, way higher in the London Underground, which kind of defeats the whole narrative, doesn't it? Then we talked about ways which we could falsify the CO2 narrative. There's just a vast amount of information out there. There's lots of very good websites that are just packed with scientific citations that give the lie to that narrative and show that there are many, many scientists who've put their heads up above the parapet and written papers. And to be in command of that information is very important. You could even actually show the benefits of higher CO2 levels in terms of increased greening on the planet. People don't seem to realise that since CO2 levels went up from 0.04% to around about 0.06% over the last 30-40 years, there's actually been a noticeable greening effect taking place all across the planet. The Sahel region near the Sahara in Africa is actually greening and is becoming a new breadbasket for that continent. Very interesting stuff. So make people aware of that. I'll try and read my own scribble here. Leveraging the inevitability of the truth getting out. So this is the thing about the truth. All you have to do is to get the truth out there, and it will defend itself. There's problems with people who are involved in politics and careers. They worry about their political reputation and their career reputation, and pressure from managers and peers, peer groups. But if you can get the right information to them, the truth, then the cogs will start turning. Keep the truth pure. We could definitely do with recruiting some knowledgeable psychologists, even NLP practitioners. I know there's a lot of flack levelled against NLP, but at the end of the day, it's just a mechanism for communicating effectively and compellingly and talking to people at levels that resonate with the way their own mind works. Yes, so the demographic, the target demographic is divided between those who are never going to listen to us, those who are already woken up, and those who are rational and open to persuasion. Those are the people we need to target. We could talk about follow the money and find the truth, show how that works, show how there's so much vested commercial interest in all this. Gently encourage people to ask questions, provide some information, but avoid sort of proselytizing. We're just giving them information, inviting them to think. How are we doing for time?
We're behind time. So.
Right. Okay. There's a lot more scribble there. Drawing out the lethal effects of cold weather, the reality and effects of geoengineering. As I said, there's lots of great websites with good information about climate stuff. Yes. There are several very good documentary films. I've put a couple of them up on the new website. I will put the Great Dimming. Is it? No, it's called The Dimming. Yeah, we'll put that up. Okay. I think I'll probably shut up now.
We'll do another bit in a minute.
Thanks, Bridgen.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much.